Hi, welcome to our podcast. This week, Andrew and I are going to be discussing Married at First Sight and a little bit more about My Mum, Your Dad. Just to tell you a little bit about us, my name's Trelawney. I'm a dating coach. I've also worked at the high end of matchmaking for 10 years, and I absolutely love reality TV. Andrew, would you like to tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yeah, my name's Andrew Park-Dennis. I'm managing director of the biggest matchmaking group in the UK. And yeah, me too. I love all reality TVs, especially in and around dating.
Thank you. So should we start with the commitment ceremony? Married at First Sight, it was a really interesting episode. I think it's the first commitment ceremony they've had this season, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this concept is that if both partners want to stay, that's great. If within the marriage, if one partner has decided this relationship isn't for them and they want to leave, they actually can't leave unless their partner wants to leave too, which is a kind of suffocating thought. But I understand it's interesting because it makes people kind of put that extra effort in. And often life is like that. You know, if you're in a serious relationship, a marriage, you've got a house, you've got children, you can't just walk out. So it's a test.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think one of the things it makes people do is it makes them truly focus on it because, you know, that's often the case that doesn't see people progress in a relationship because at the first hurdle, they jump ship. Whereas this is a far more pressurized and pressure cooker environment that means that people have to stay and explore themselves. And actually, when faced with things about themselves they don't like, they have to keep digging and go through it. So yeah, it's a clever way to do it, really.
Yeah, and really that is what marriage is, isn't it? When you think about it, if you want your marriage to last, you have to have that staying power. Even if sometimes the other person doesn't want to stay, you know, you have to try to still be motivated, work together. And yeah, that's exactly what it's all about. So it is pretty clever. So let's think about the first couple. Ella and Nathaniel were the first ones I thought we would chat about today. So give me your take, first of all, on how you felt about how they were together at the commitment ceremony.
You know what? I think in some ways they've come a long way. In other ways, those problems that they had on honeymoon are still very real. I think what was quite nice to see is the fact that they had actually listened to each other. All of a sudden, Nathaniel, I don't think he's particularly taken complete responsibility for the shame and an outing he did of Ella. I think he will apologise, but with reason. And that's not really an apology.
Yeah,
you know,
sorry, but.
Yeah, sorry, but. And as soon as that book comes along, we know, well, basically, you're not saying sorry, you're justifying your point. But I think Ella, obviously, at the commitment ceremony, was very vulnerable, probably the most vulnerable we've seen. And I think that probably falls in line with being able to address the group and talk about the transition she's made and the difficulties that that's had on her life up to that point, which, you know, I can't even begin to imagine what she's been through. So there's always going to be a natural resistance. And I guess the caricature that Nathaniel allures to is the fact that that's a protection, it's a shield, you know, because, you know, that keeps her safe. And he's very much, well, I need to find more about you. But as he does, to throw it back when he does, you know, that's just gonna make Ella seize up. So yeah, they've come a distance, but I'm still not quite sure about them at the minute. I think Nathaniel's got a lot of work to do, and perhaps Ella has as well, to be fair. So
yeah, we're seeing a lot of the kind of destructive patterns that really break relationships down. So we're seeing every discussion that touches any kind of nerve becoming very fiery. We're seeing vulnerabilities not really being able to be expressed, although they did make some progress within the commitment ceremony. One of the things I found most disturbing, I think, about the relationship is the fact that Ella's confidence, she says it's being knocked. I think that Nathaniel is perfectly right in saying, I want to find out more about you before I commit to an intimate relationship. But because she does have this real need for affirmation, together, I just feel that it's quite a negative mix. So I'm really hoping that the fact that they've decided to stay together, they are going to really think about what they're doing to each other, what their words do to each other, what their behaviors do to each other.
it's basic respect and not looking to point score. And I
Mm,
think throughout that, at the minute, it's almost like, well, I've had this trouble. Well, I've had this trouble. This
yes.
is my insecurity. This is, and they're not actually listening. They're waiting to speak. And in waiting to speak, they're missing a lot of the little nuances that the other person's saying to them. And actually, I think for Ella, if Nathaniel just says, look, I really find you attractive, but in order for me to commit to you on a physical level, I just need to find out more from you because I do respect you. And I want that when we do take that next step, that to be a respectful step. Really is that simple, as opposed to sitting on the couch and saying, I don't know if I do find you attractive yet. That's hard to take. It's hard to swallow because everybody wants to feel attracted. Yes, we understand it's early in the process and the digging around personalities. And I think going back to what you said, I think when they react, it's because a little bit of their personality that they're not particularly comfortable with comes out. So defense comes in and they deflect and attack. And that's the problem. They've just got to be more honest and understanding and actually considerate of each other's feelings as they speak.
That's right. You feel as if you were in a room with them. You can just feel how uncomfortable it would be.
It's either going to be a good day or it's going to be a really bad night.
Yeah.
There's no in
You'd just
between.
be waiting for something to trigger one of them.
Yeah.
But talking about uncomfortable, let's move on to Roz and Thomas.
Yes.
Now, I found that really uncomfortable to watch, and I'll explain what I found really, really sad, actually, at the end. So obviously Thomas has been making it very clear, I would like to wait. I'd like to know if you're really attracted to me before we have this kind of physical affection between us or any intimacy. He decides they go into the one, they decide together, but he lets his guard down and they're intimate. And the following morning, he feels completely ignored. He can sense that she's feeling this was probably a mistake. He's feeling really crushed. They go through the commitment ceremony. It's completely uncomfortable to watch. For some bizarre reason, they both decide that they want to stay, which you can give me your take on that in a minute. But when they then move to the sofa, I don't know if you noticed, but Roz makes a joke with the girl next to her. Oh, I better sit a little bit closer to him just in case, which I feel he hears. And there was just such a disconnect. And it really made me feel as though I wanted to say to them, no, leave now. This is going to be damaging. What did you think?
I think, what, with the two of them, I think, they've wanted to push it on more actually to the physical stage, or certainly I think Ross has. And I think Thomas has been reserved, holding back. He's been hurt. He's been upset in the past. And I actually thought it was actually more forced. I think he felt he had to be intimate in order to prove to Roz that he liked her. He did that. And then just at his most vulnerable, at the time where he'd given everything and sort of allowed himself to go in a path that he didn't need to. I mean, there's a lesson to be learned there. There's nothing wrong. The communication's big, but hold back until you're comfortable, because those insecurities have just risen straight to the surface. And then that's Roz has kind of not helped that by saying, I felt nothing afterwards, and then not giving him any eye contact or talk to him and just saying, and to test somebody in that deep manner, because when it becomes sexual, that connection, there's so much trust in that and so much openness. And then to be told, well, I was just finding out if I liked you, that's really tough. And I actually think I can't see at the minute that developing.
No.
Unless, and okay, also I think it was incredibly awkward afterwards on the sofa. And I know that she said we'll sit closer, but there was still probably the biggest gap between them out of most of the couples, apart from a couple, obviously. But I actually thought in the first instant Thomas was probably being a little bit too reserved. But then I think when Roz got what she wanted, which was to move the relationship to more physicality, he got absolutely shot down in flames, and that's tough. That's all his fears of holding back coming back to bite him straight away.
Have you heard of something called the ick?
The ick? Yes, I've heard of the ick, yes.
Roz completely had the ick,
yes,
which basically means you suddenly really go off someone physically.
I think she had the ick in the first instant.
Yeah, but she kept trying, she kept trying these physical connection, but she didn't try to hide it at all, which was why I found it so difficult to watch. It was, you know, displaying to the nation, I've got the ick. I am really finding this guy physically repulsive almost right now. And I'm not going to hide it from anyone. It was just very, very uncomfortable. So let's see how they get on. But again, I hope they make the right decision ultimately, because it could be quite damaging. Yes, they can work through it, but both parties have to commit to that. Otherwise, it felt very toxic to me. It's a toxic relationship, and that's not healthy for anyone. There's a difference between working on something and making someone else feel bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the biggest problem for me, Dad, is they've gone from A to Z in one swift step. You know, they weren't even holding hands or having a cuddle. And then the next minute they've jumped into bed together to try and rectify that. Well, there's no emotional connection, because they haven't even sort of had a little cuddle or woke up, put their arm around each other, grabbed a cup of coffee, talked in bed, found out about each other. They've just gone from nothing to the most intimate thing you can do. And there's a lot of holes been left behind that have never been filled. And that's not a good basis for that relationship, I believe.
Did you see the faces of the other couples when they actually said they'd been intimate? They almost all fell off their chairs.
They were shocked, weren't they?
Because there's others that are desperate for it to happen, and then they realise it actually happened with Roz and Thomas. The most aloof relationship of everyone.
They have.
Okay, so a completely different kind of feel, Tasha and Paul. How did you feel about their relationship?
Tasha and Paul, you know what? Their relationship, I believe, is strong. You know, I think they're taking it at their own basis. I think they've got that initial instinct connection. I think they make each other feel comfortable. They appreciate each other's vulnerabilities. There's no rush. They joke about wanting to get to the next step, but they're taking stepping stones. They're not jumping in. They understand the value of getting to know each other, getting to know that trust and security in each other. And yeah, I think we both want to go to the next stage of intimacy, but they're doing it in their own time. They're not feeling the pressure of the group. They're not feeling the pressure. They're focused on themselves. And that's really important. So yeah, I do think they've got a very strong foundation to move forward from. And I do think they will.
Yeah. And isn't it sweet that they said they're best friends and a married couple, and yet they are still waiting and allowing their relationship to grow? So I think everybody was also equally as shocked that they hadn't become intimate as they were that Ross and Thomas had become intimate, because the Tasha and Paul seem so close. But I thought it was very sweet, actually, that they would take.
I did. I thought it was sweet. It was respectful. I think when we look at some of the other couples, I mean, I know we're not necessarily going to discuss some of them, but Shona and Brad, they've gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And I really worry for that relationship. As strong as it looks now, I think any sort of problems they hit, I think the wheels could come off really quick, because to say you love somebody after a matter of days is a massive thing to state. And so I personally think Tasha and Paul are doing it at the right pace, the right speed, understanding each other's needs. And when that happens, there'll be such an emotional connection on top of a physical connection that will really act as binding glue to their relationship, as opposed to what we've seen with Roz and Thomas, where actually it's more pulling it apart.
Yeah. Talking about Shona and Brad just quickly, I do feel a little bit nervous for Shona, because Brad seems to want to be on this adventurous roller coaster with all sorts of things on his list to try, and she seems to be much more, you know, I just love being a wife, and I like things to be, you know, not too out there. So I think eventually Brad seems Brad seems such a strong personality. He's really out there. You can feel it. He wants to try everything. He wants to live life in the fast lane. So that can be quite a difficult partner to keep up with if you're not of the same mindset. So we'll see what happens there. But yes, they seem very, very happy. But I do worry that it's really intense now, but it could implode very intensely as well, potentially.
No, I agree.
So completely different vibe, Jay and Luke.
Yes. Lovely.
They were one of our favourites when we spoke last week. How are you feeling about them now?
Oh, they go from strength to strength, don't they? I think their relationship is built on acceptance, understanding, and it's deeper than the physicality. I think there's an emotional connection. I think when we look at the couples which are struggling, I think a lot of them are wanting the partner to become what they want. And marriage is about loving the person you're with for their strengths, their weaknesses, their beige flags, perhaps. I mean, we don't want too many people with red flags, but they understand that you've got to go that little bit deeper and understanding and appreciating somebody for what they are as opposed to what you want them to be. Because as soon as people start to change, which we've seen a lot with certain couples, that can only be sustainable for a short period of time before the person you are becomes present, and then all of a sudden everything that's there's a bit of facade and it falls away very quickly. So yeah, with Jay and Luke, yeah, you've got to love them, haven't you? I mean, they have fun, they laugh, the relationship's built on friendship, and that's massive. So yeah, I do really like those, and I can't see them right now falling off. Yeah, I'm sure they'll have a few moments of insecurities, and you know, nothing's perfect in this world. If it was, then it would be imperfect. So, you know, I do think when they do get challenges, they'll address them together and they'll overcome them. You know, or at least I hope so, because I do really like them as a couple.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting what you say about accepting someone for who they are and not what you want them to be, because I think that is the biggest problem in modern dating. People create a checklist, and I've seen it with so many friends, so many clients that I have with coaching. They say, I know exactly what I want. That's really difficult, to know exactly what you want and try to find that in a person, because you start to project all of those things. So you're not really seeing the person for who they are, you're seeing them for what you want them to be. And ultimately they're going to disappoint because they are their own person. They're not existing to fill your checklist. So I think it's a real problem with modern dating, and it's something we try all the time to turn around and kind of get people to think about things in a more human way than the kind of quite destructive online, what do you want, tick this box, tick this box, tick this box, and then wait for that, robot to be created and delivered to you. Just doesn't work like that, does it?
It's a bit like an old 80s film, Weird Science, where you can put it into a machine and out pops your perfect person. But actually, there really is the perfect person, because if everything is exactly similar, there's nothing really to talk about. You need those differences in a relationship to be able to grow with each other, because, every view, I'm sure you'd agree, that you've got and every view that I've got isn't necessarily the correct one. You learn and develop and adapt from the person you're with and grow together. Whereas if you're just putting a checklist together, then you're creating the impossible. And to a degree, it's almost relationship blocking, because if you tick enough boxes, there's not going to be somebody there to meet, and that justifies you to think, well, this isn't going to work for me. Whatever arena you're looking for love in, if you put too many blocks in the way, it's almost like self-protection to avoid going to the next step. So yeah, it's really important to have differences, similar morals, that's really key, but certainly appreciating people for the differences, and not just wanting this
exactly what you want
person that's there. Yeah,
there's a sense of, another big mistake people make when starting relationships is focusing on how the other person makes them feel. Now, it's important that somebody makes you feel good, but if you're only thinking, how are you making me feel? Are you what I deserve? It becomes about me, and it's very difficult to have a kind of a give and take relationship that grows, because you're only focused on how you feel. So that person has to kind of achieve the impossible by making you happy all the time. So yeah, it's very much about being on an equal playing field, both putting in effort, both taking care of each other and yourselves, and having, like you said, the shared values, the shared goals, a shared kind of moral framework. They're the really important things, not whether somebody's 6'2" or 6'4", or has hair or not hair, all of these things.
Look, you have superficial love, don't you? And I think this is the thing, perhaps we'll see further down the line with Shona and Brad, is you can have that instant attraction, it's important, but it's surface lust. And yes, they might say they love each other, and it may continue, but love comes from, like we spoke last week, matters of the heart, the things that are important to you to go and do, that the values, whether it be family, whether it be friends, whether, you know, you're ambitious in work and you need that person to respect and support that. That's what matters far more than that initial, whether they're 6'4" or, you know, a certain size or whatever people are looking for. That's superficial and that disappears over time. And what remains is matters of the heart. And if you've got connection there, and that's what's so important, to look like beneath the surface and see somebody's soul is where you will always find love, in my opinion.
Yeah, let yourself become fond of someone. See if you're going to become fond of someone before you're kind of judging them too harshly. I think that's the most important lesson, isn't it? Because the perfect person for you may be completely different to your checklist, and you don't want to miss out.
Well, I think that's true, and I think we may even see that with Arthur and Laura as the journey goes through, because obviously we've said Laura wants a Chelsea boy, doesn't she? Who's this, that, and that. She's very used to that, but she did say this time, and I was pleased for her to say it. I've always done that, and it's clearly not worked for me. So perhaps I do need to open myself up to different avenues to find the person, you know, because having those differences will make Laura shine in her own right, and then Arthur can shine in his own right in a completely different arena. There's no competition, I guess is what I'm saying. They're allowed to both journey free together, but have the support of each other. So that may work further down the line, but there is work to be done there still.
Yeah, it was interesting that Arthur again touched on the fact that he struggles with honesty. That was a big thing to say, particularly on TV. You know, he struggles with honesty because he tries to look better than he is, which is a self-confidence, self-esteem thing. However, it's really difficult to be in a relationship with somebody who struggles with white lies, as he calls them. So that, I think, will be the problem unless he can conquer that, because Laura is very strong. He's clearly in awe of her. So he's got to learn, okay, she's accepting me for who I am, and I don't need to keep saying what I think she wants to hear, because you do see that in relationships when one partner feels as though the other is much more stronger, much more desirable, much more successful. It can be quite difficult for them to feel as though they're keeping up. So those kind of white lies can creep in just to try and feel like an equal. I really hope that Arthur manages to conquer that with Laura's help and support. But again, she's not his therapist.
No.
So let's see where I can feel it's slipping into that dynamic if they're not careful. She's teacher, he's student, she's mum, he's child, you know, so I think that's just what they've got to avoid there, because that becomes very unattractive after a while.
Well, it does. If anything, you do, like you say, you almost feel like you're babysitting somebody through their emotions. And, you know, yes, it's nice to emotionally grow together and understand each other, but you don't want to be teaching somebody the basics of emotions. And being honest is a very basic part of a relationship that's going to work, you know. And I think for him, it's confidence, it's self-belief, it's feeling that he's inadequate. Now, Laura can help him to a degree with that, but there will get a point where that will become incredibly unattractive and it will become too needy. And like you've said, she's not there to guide him through a relationship. He's got to sort of step up and think, right, I'm going to be honest, this has been raised, I'm going to address it. Yeah, he rewrote his vows, which was a first start to it, and actually put his own heart into it, as opposed to just, I mean, I couldn't believe he copied and pasted off the internet his marriage vows. I mean, it's just like, you just think, no. I mean,
he gives off that energy. He gives energy off, actually.
It's just, he's just got to actually just step up, be himself, and accept that if it doesn't work, that's fine. But he's got to maintain who he is. And when he does, she likes it. Laura loves it. You know, that's when she finds him most attractive, when he's actually letting the facade go, being a little bit open and, you know, vulnerable, and showing himself for what he is. And that's far more attractive than somebody who's lying all the time. Because eventually those lies get on.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, in terms of the couples, who provided you with the biggest surprise or shock of the program?
Surprise and shock, I would say, at the minute, Shona and Brad. I think I'm quite surprised how fast they've moved, and I don't find it real right now. it almost feels like the peacocking. I know when I think Ros and Thomas came back to sit on the sofa, the first thing they did, who was sat behind them, was give each other quite an intimate kiss. And I didn't, if I'm honest, I didn't think that was appropriate at the time, because they were meant to be supporting, but it's almost like, oh, we know you're not doing well, but why don't you take a look at us? And so
very high school.
Yeah, it does feel like that. I think the people, not shocked, I'm happy to see doing so well as Jay and Luke. I think that they're making great gains on a relationship that's going to be sustainable, along with Tasha and Paul. But there is some people in very dark places at the minute, and you know that will unravel over the next few weeks, I guess, to see whether they can turn it around. But yeah, and also I guess the other thing with Ros and Thomas, I was quite shocked that once Thomas took that step to be intimate, which was so far removed from where he wanted to go, that he's just had this stone wall ever since. And that surprised me, because I thought, right, he's finally moved on to where she wants him to be, and actually has been humiliated straight afterwards. So that was quite shocking to see.
Yeah, I have to say my biggest shock is that Ros and Thomas have decided to carry on with this torturous situation. I was expecting them to say leave, but anyway, let's keep our fingers crossed for them. So we've got a little bit of time left, so let's just touch on the finale of My Mum, Your Dad.
Yes.
So obviously the big plot twist here, I suppose you could say, for the contestants was that they were going to find out whether they had the blessing of their child or not to carry on the relationship. And it kind of reflects real life. So you've spent decades bringing up your children, you meet a new partner, you finally decide you're ready for love, but you really do need the blessing of your children. And it's interesting to think about what happens for people whose children just will not give their blessing, are just not interested in the new partner. Do they pursue their dream of love, or do they listen to their child and kind of say, no, okay, I'm going to back off? It's what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very tough one. I think having the support of your family, which is why I quite like the show, because I think that the kids are involved from the beginning, so they know they've got that blessing. I think it's very tricky to navigate if you've got children and they don't like your new partner and they don't want it to progress. I would arguably say 8 times out of 10, the probability is it won't get as far as you'd like, because you know, at the end of the day, your children you've looked after, they are and always will be, regardless of age, your main concern. And I think if they're not on board, that becomes very difficult to navigate that relationship. And in most cases, I don't see it does, unless they decide that they're not going to spend so much time with the kids or see the kids, which, you know, is a massive thing to sort of do. More often than not, I think you do need your approval of your children. And that's why it's worked quite well. And to be fair, the kids gave them a bit of a grilling as well, didn't they? Even the stronger couples. So that was quite nice, you know, quite good to see that they're invested, and that shows that they care.
Yeah, it's sweet to see how much the kids care. I think it can be difficult for parents with grown-up or almost grown-up children who want to find a new partner, because often the children, although they're almost grown up, they're used to having you to yourself, so they're potentially not open, or they've seen you been hurt before, so they're potentially not open. And sometimes they've got such loyalty to your previous partner. If it's their mum or their dad, they're equally not open. So it can be really tricky for people in that scenario that are looking for love and have older children who have much stronger opinions than when they're little. So not quite as adaptable as when they're little.
No. And it's funny with Janie and Roger. I mean, Roger, I mean, I'm so pleased that they've come on, and certainly watching afterwards, checking in to see how they're doing. They're still together and absolutely in a blossoming relationship. And even Roger's daughter, who was so keen to push him forward, when they had that chat, she was then saying, you know, it is difficult to see you with somebody else because it's not mum and all this. So as much as she wanted it, the reality when it hit, probably hit harder than she thought it might, to see her dad actually happy somewhere else. As much as that was her heart's desire, it's still tough to see. So, but thrilled that Roger and Janie are doing so well, actually, and actually outside of the experiment have really settled into each other, which is great.
Yeah, I've seen all the promotions where they're together and happy, and I think they posted a bed snap on social media. So.
Yeah, they did. I saw that. Yeah, I did see that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the saddest ones, I thought, who've come out of that was Natalie and Paul, because I actually really thought that they were so strong in the experiment. Both kids really supported it. Whether it was distance or damage from previous relationships that eventually caused it, because I had high hopes for those, but they've now parted company, I think amicably. But sad to see, because I did feel that they've been completely vulnerable with each other. But obviously, you know, there was too much to overcome, perhaps in travel, and also perhaps the emotional damage that had been done previously, really.
Yeah,
But
I think it's a great show. I really hope it comes back. It does, as we said last week, it shows that whatever age you are, whatever your situation, you do deserve love. If you
yes,
can open your heart to it. We see that as we get older, people are carrying so many more wounds,
yes,
the knocks of life. So for them to be given a fresh page and a new chapter and hope and excitement and all of those lovely feelings and all of those lovely things that happen when you do find a great new relationship, it's really lovely to see. I have seen that casting is open actually for season 2, so there's definitely going to be a season 2.
I'd love it to be a little bit longer. If I'm honest, if they're going to introduce, like they do in Love Island, different men and different women in at different periods of the show, I think in order, we saw it with Martin Hayes. You know, I really did feel for him because he had 2 connections, and then Martin M. Although Martin M got his comeuppance because he's realised that actually, if you're a player and you play 2 strong women, which they were, then unfortunately you're going to end up very lonely at the end of it,
Yeah.
and rightly so. But it would be nice to have it a little bit longer, so there's more time to develop those connections if it's going to be swapped around from time to time by introducing people. But this is the first show, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. So sadly, we are almost out of time, Andrew. So we're going to be back next week with lots of insight and thoughts and general chatter about the best dating shows of the week and anything else that happens that interests us in the world of dating.
Yeah, look forward to it, and look
All
forward
right.
to seeing everybody again then.
Okay, thank you. See you soon.
Thanks a lot. See you. Bye bye.